Hello and welcome to Cheating Wife Chronicles.
The moment I heard my father's voice over the phone, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just his tone, sharp, direct, and entirely devoid of the usual pleasantries. It was what he said. "We're having a family meeting tomorrow. Your brother will be there too." I gripped my phone tighter, feeling my stomach turn. 4 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw my brother, the man who stole my wife. The betrayal had left a scar that never truly healed, but I learned to live with it. I buried myself in work, rebuilt my life piece by piece, and convinced myself I had moved on. I told myself that what they did was in the past, that I didn't care anymore, but my father's words told me otherwise. Now he was back, and so was she. I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those words pressing down on me. My father didn't call to ask if I wanted to come. He told me. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. I didn't respond right away. My fingers hovered over my phone, my mind screaming at me to decline, to make an excuse, but deep down I knew I had no choice. Avoiding them forever wasn't realistic, and if my father was calling this meeting, it had to be important. So, with a heavy breath, I forced out a simple response. "I'll be there." The next evening, as I pulled up to my father's house, memories of what happened came rushing back. The driveway where I once parked beside my brother's car, laughing about stupid things. The porch where I had stood with my wife, holding her close, thinking we had a lifetime ahead of us. The front door which I had slammed 4 years ago when I walked away, refusing to look back, and now I was walking through it again. I stepped inside, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. The familiar scent of my father's cigars lingered in the air, mixed with the faintest trace of my mother's old lavender perfume. Though she had been gone for years, some things never changed. But some things did, because as I walked into the living room, there they were, sitting together, acting like nothing had ever happened. My brother lounged back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the side. His signature smugness was still there, the same arrogance he had always carried. He looked as put together as ever, perfectly pressed shirt, hairstyle just right, a watch that cost more than some people's rent. He was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, and yet here he was, sitting across from me, the man who had taken everything from me. And then my eyes landed on her, my ex-wife. She looked at me the way a cat looks at a mouse it has already caught, amused, relaxed, confident that I wasn't a threat. Her eyes scanned me up and down, and then she smiled as if seeing an old friend instead of the husband she had betrayed. "Still single?" my brother sneered, tilting his head. I felt my fingers twitch. A small, sharp part of me wanted to lunge across the room and wipe that smug grin off his face, but I forced myself to stay still. And then she laughed, a soft, cruel laugh that made my stomach tighten. "Hey, ugly, still the same?" I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose. I had spent years preparing for this moment, convincing myself that if I ever saw them again, I wouldn't let them get to me, that I had grown beyond their petty jabs. But standing here now, hearing their voices, seeing their faces, it was like no time had passed at all. Before I could speak, my father stood up. The room fell silent instantly. My father was not a man to be interrupted. He had always been the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. There was something about him, his posture, his presence, that commanded attention. "Good timing," he said, his gaze shifting from my brother to me. "I have something important to tell you." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, a weight, a finality. I glanced at my brother, and for the first time, I saw his smirk falter. My ex-wife sat up a little straighter, her fingers curling slightly on the armrest. They weren't expecting this, and suddenly I knew this wasn't just a family meeting. This was something more. My father turned and walked toward his desk, pulling out a thick envelope. He set it down on the table between us with deliberate care. "This is my will." The air in the room changed instantly. I could feel it, thick and heavy, pressing down on all of us. My brother's smirk was gone entirely now, replaced by something else, something uncertain. My ex-wife shifted in her seat, and for the first time since I walked into the house, she didn't look so confident. "Dad?" my brother said slowly, his voice no longer carrying its usual arrogance. "Why are we talking about this now?" My father's eyes didn't waver. "Because I don't have time to waste." The words landed with the weight of a hammer. Something cold crept into my stomach. My father had always been strong. He was the kind of man who never let anyone see his weaknesses, never showed a crack in his armor. But now, as I looked at him, I noticed something different. The lines on his face seemed deeper. His frame, though still sturdy, looked thinner than I remembered. And suddenly, I knew something was wrong. My brother must have realized it too, because he sat up straighter, his fingers tightening on the arm of his chair. His eyes flickered between me and our father, searching for answers, but my father didn't give him the chance to ask. "I have something else to tell you," he said, his voice still even, still calm, but there was an edge to it now. I felt it before he even said the words. "I have terminal cancer. 3 months left." Silence. My brother's mouth fell open slightly, but no words came out. My ex-wife's smirk had completely vanished, replaced by something unreadable. For the first time since I walked into this house, neither of them had anything to say. And as I sat there, staring at my father, everything else faded away. The past, the betrayal, the bitterness, it all fell into the background because none of it mattered anymore. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't thinking about my brother or my ex-wife. I was thinking about my father and how much time he had left. I sat in stunned silence, my father's words echoing in my head. 3 months. 3 months to process a reality I wasn't ready for. My father, the strongest man I had ever known, the one who had stood firm through every storm, was dying. I swallowed hard, stealing a glance at my brother. His face was unreadable, but I knew him well enough to recognize the subtle shifts in his expression, the tightening of his jaw, the slight twitch of his fingers. He was calculating, not grieving, not mourning, calculating. And her? My ex-wife sat beside him, her posture suddenly stiff, her eyes darting between my father and the thick envelope on the table. She wasn't worried about the man who had once treated her like a daughter. She was worried about what this meant for them. I shouldn't have been surprised. My brother had always been the golden child, charming, ambitious, and effortlessly successful. He could do no wrong in my father's eyes when we were younger. The eldest son, the one who was supposed to carry the family name with pride. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the one who worked hard but was always overshadowed, and then he took the one thing that mattered most, my wife. She and I had built a life together. We had plans, dreams, a future I thought was unshakable. I believed we were happy, but behind my back, they had been sneaking around, whispering their lies, building their own future, while I remained oblivious. I found out the hard way. I still remember the night everything fell apart. It had been an ordinary evening, or so I thought. I had made dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant, planning to surprise her after a long day at work. I walked into that dimly lit restaurant, scanning the tables, expecting to find my wife waiting for me. Instead, I found her hand in hand with my brother, their laughter cutting through the air like a blade, casual and intimate, the kind that came from familiarity, from love. My feet felt rooted to the ground, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing, but then, as if sensing my presence, she turned, and she didn't even flinch. No guilt, no shock, just a lazy, amused smile. "Did you really not know?" she asked, tilting her head, her voice dripping with condescension. "Everyone else noticed." "And my brother?" He simply sighed, setting his glass down with the same indifference he had always carried. "It's over. Let's not make this dramatic." Dramatic, as if my entire world hadn't just shattered in a single second. The divorce was brutal, not just because of the legalities, but because of the sheer humiliation. My brother married her within months. Together they flaunted their new life, luxury vacations, extravagant dinners, an expensive house that should have been mine. I walked away with nothing but my dignity, and even that had taken a hit. And now, 4 years later, they were sitting in my father's house, acting like they still owned the world. But something told me this time would be different. I exhaled, shaking off the past as I refocused on the present. My father cleared his throat, his gaze locking onto my brother. "There's something you need to understand," he said, voice calm but firm. My brother tensed slightly. "I built this family's wealth from nothing. I sacrificed, I worked, I bled to make sure you both had everything you needed. But there's a difference between needing something and feeling entitled to it." The room was suffocatingly silent. My brother let out a small, forced chuckle. "Dad, come on. This isn't necessary." "Don't interrupt me," my father cut in sharply. I watched as my brother's jaw clenched, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. He wasn't used to being shut down. He had always had a way of twisting things to work in his favor, manipulating situations to make himself look like the victim. But not this time. "You betrayed your own blood," my father continued. You humiliated your brother, you took what wasn't yours, and you did it with a smile on your face." My brother's smirk faltered. My father leaned forward, his next words slow and deliberate. "You don't deserve a damn thing." My brother sat up straighter, his entire demeanor shifting. His wife's fingers curled against the armrest, her face growing tight with restrained anger. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice sharper than before. My father didn't blink. "It means you're both in for a very rude awakening." I didn't say a word. I just watched. For years, I had lived with the pain of their betrayal. For years, I had told myself that karma didn't exist, that people like them always got away with their sins. But sitting here now, watching the first cracks of panic creep into their expressions, I realized something. I had been wrong, and they were about to learn what it felt like to lose everything. The silence in the room was suffocating, pressing down on all of us like a heavy weight. My father's words had hit like a hammer, shattering the illusion my brother and his wife had built for themselves. "You don't deserve a damn thing." I saw the flicker of uncertainty in my brother's eyes, the tightening of his jaw as he processed what had just been said. His wife, usually the picture of arrogance, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers tapping against her thigh in restless agitation. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. For years I had carried the weight of their betrayal, had suffered the humiliation, the anger, the pain. But now, as I sat across from them, watching the first hints of fear creep into their perfect, controlled expressions, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Satisfaction. My father leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving my brother's face. "Before we go any further, let's talk about something important," he said, pulling out a thick envelope from the desk beside him. I glanced at my brother, watching as his hands curled into fists. He knew exactly what was in that envelope. We both did. My father's will. And that meant one thing. He wasn't just here to lecture us. He was here to set things in stone. My father set the envelope down on the table with deliberate care. "I want you to know exactly where my assets are going," he said, his voice as calm as ever, "because some of you seem to think you have rights to things you don't deserve." I watched as my brother swallowed hard. His wife's smirk was long gone now, replaced by something colder, something calculating. "Wait, Dad, why are we talking about this now?" My brother finally spoke, his voice tight. My father exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. "Because I don't have time to waste," he said. And then the words that changed everything. "I have terminal cancer, 3 months left." The air in the room seemed to vanish. My brother's back straightened so fast, it was as if someone had yanked a cord in his spine. His wife's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening, not with grief, not with sadness, but with sheer, raw shock. I felt my stomach tighten. I had suspected something was wrong. The weight in my father's voice, the way his clothes fit a little looser, the tiredness in his eyes, signs I should have noticed earlier, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that knocked the breath from my lungs. 3 months. That was all the time I had left with the only parent I had. "You never told us this," my brother muttered, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. My father didn't blink. "I didn't feel the need to. But now that you're here, let's discuss what really matters." He walked over to his desk, pulled out another stack of documents, and laid them in front of us. "These are records of all my financial transactions, my will, and something else." He paused, his gaze sharp. "Records of what happened 4 years ago." I frowned. What was he talking about? My father tapped his finger on one of the documents. "Do you know where you were when your mother was sick?" A sick feeling crawled up my spine. Our mother, kind, loving, and always putting family first, had passed away shortly after my brother's betrayal. I had been too consumed by my own pain to notice much at the time, but I knew she had spent her last months in and out of hospitals, growing weaker with each passing day. My brother scoffed, shaking his head. "Dad, come on, what does this have to do with anything?" My father ignored him. "These are bank statements," he continued. "You two received money from me for her medical care, $5,000 a month." I watched as my brother's face twitched, a slow, creeping redness spreading across his skin. "But there's a problem," my father continued, his voice cold. "No payments were ever made." The silence was deafening. My ex-wife sat stiff. My father didn't stop there. He pulled his laptop closer, clicked a few keys, and then turned the screen toward us. "There's more," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. A video began playing. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then, As the grainy footage became clearer, realization hit me like a punch to the gut. A timestamp, a location, and then my brother and his wife. The footage was from 4 years ago, the night our mother was struggling for breath in her hospital bed. They weren't with her. They weren't even home. They were at a luxury hotel, laughing, drinking, celebrating. The room felt like it had dropped in temperature. I turned to my brother, waiting for some kind of explanation, some pathetic excuse, but for the first time in his life, he didn't have one. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, his face going from red to pale in a matter of seconds. His wife grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. This is ridiculous, she sputtered, her voice just a little too high, a little too defensive. My father tilted his head. Is it? My brother slammed his hands against the table, his voice rising. You think this changes anything? What do you want from me, Dad? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. Are we done now? My father's expression remained unreadable. No, he said simply. We're far from done. I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. For years, I had believed that my brother and his wife had taken everything from me, but as I sat there, watching them unravel under my father's quiet, unrelenting judgment, I realized something. They weren't as untouchable as they thought. And this was only the beginning. The weight of my father's words settled over the room like a thick fog, suffocating and inescapable. My brother had always been good at talking his way out of trouble, twisting stories to make himself look like the victim. But now, he was speechless. For once in his life, he had no control over the narrative. I glanced at my father, who remained calm, his fingers resting lightly on the stack of documents in front of him. He had always been a man of few words, never one to waste time on theatrics. When he spoke, people listened, and right now, my brother and his wife were terrified. You abandoned your own mother for money, my father said, his voice eerily even. And then, as if that wasn't enough, you stole from me. I turned back to my brother, watching as his face twisted with something between panic and fury. That's not true, he said through gritted teeth. I don't know where you're getting this, but don't lie to me. My father's voice was sharp enough to cut through steel. He clicked a button on his laptop and another set of images popped up on the screen. Bank statements, transactions, proof of extravagant spending that lined up perfectly with the months my mother had been sick. Thousands of dollars withdrawn from my father's account, money that was meant for her medical care. And where had it gone instead? Shopping sprees, luxury hotels, 5-star dinners. My ex-wife let out a breath, shifting in her seat. This is ridiculous. What are you even trying to prove here? My father didn't even look at her. That I was blind, he said. Blind to what you two really were. My brother let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. Come on, Dad. It's not like you're hurting for money. You let your mother die alone. The words slammed into the room like a gunshot. I felt my chest tighten, my hands curling into fists at my sides. My mother had deserved better. She had deserved to know that the son she had loved unconditionally wasn't off spending her medical funds on cocktails and luxury resorts. But she never got that, because my brother had made sure of it. I had been drowning in my own grief, my own heartbreak, and I had assumed that they were too, that they were just as devastated, just as lost. But now, as I sat here watching them, I realized they had never mourned at all. They had been celebrating, and something inside me snapped. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice low. Whatever you spent that money on, was it worth it? My brother shot me a glare. Don't start. No, I want to know. I leaned forward, staring directly into his eyes. When Mom was in that hospital bed struggling for every breath, were you happy? Were you laughing? Were you toasting to your new life while she was gasping for air? Shut up, he snapped. My ex-wife shifted again, avoiding my gaze. For the first time, she wasn't smirking, wasn't taunting me with that cruel little smile, because even she knew there was no excuse for this. My father exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples as if this entire conversation was draining what little energy he had left. I'm done talking, he said finally. The facts are right in front of you. I know what you did, and now you're going to face the consequences. A thick, tense silence followed, and then my brother laughed, a short, humorless sound. Consequences? He scoffed. What are you going to do, cut me off? I'll be fine, Dad. You think I need your money? My father just watched him. Oh, I know you need it. My brother's smirk faltered, and then, without a word, my father picked up his will. the single document that held the power to decide our futures. He turned it over in his hands before finally setting it down in front of me. "Every last cent I have," he said, his voice steady, "is going to him." The room froze. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I blinked, staring down at the papers, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. My brother, however, had no trouble understanding. He shot to his feet so fast his chair nearly toppled over. "What?" My father didn't so much as flinch. "You heard me. No, this is a joke, right?" My brother's voice rose in pitch, the panic bleeding through. His wife's head snapped toward him, her nails digging into his arm. "You can't do this," she hissed. My father raised an eyebrow. "Can I?" My brother's hand slammed onto the table. "You can't just take everything and give it to him." His face twisted with rage as he turned to me, eyes burning. "He doesn't deserve it." I tilted my head. "Why? Because I didn't steal it from you first?" His jaw clenched. His wife shook her head furiously, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. "We'll fight this," she snapped. "We'll get a lawyer." "You're welcome to try," my father interrupted, "but you won't win." His voice was final, unshakable, and I realized with a quiet sense of satisfaction that this was it. The empire my brother had built on lies and stolen wealth was crumbling around him, and this time there was nothing he could do to stop it. I sat back in my chair, watching as the panic settled into their faces. I had spent years thinking that justice would never come, that I would live the rest of my life knowing that they had taken everything from me and gotten away with it. But now the tables had turned, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The silence after my father's words was thick, suffocating. My brother stood frozen, his body rigid with disbelief, while his wife's hand clutched his arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. This isn't happening," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, but it was happening. For the first time in his life, my brother wasn't getting what he wanted, and he couldn't handle it. "Dad, you can't be serious," my brother finally spoke, his voice cracking with something dangerously close to desperation. "You're really going to throw me away? Your own son?" My father exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his forehead. For a moment, he looked tired in a way I had never seen before. But when he spoke, his voice was as steady as ever. "You threw yourself away the moment you decided to betray this family," he said. "You made your choices. Now you live with them." My brother shook his head violently. No, this isn't right." He turned to me, eyes burning with resentment. "You think you deserve this?" His voice was sharp, accusatory. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing. And Dad's just doing this to punish me." I let out a slow breath, meeting his glare with calm indifference. "If that's what helps you sleep at night," his wife finally snapped, slamming her hands on the table. "Enough," she shouted, her carefully maintained mask of control shattering. "You think you can just take everything from us? You think we're going to walk away with nothing?" My father's gaze hardened. "That's exactly what I think." I watched as the realization truly hit them. My brother, who had always lived in luxury, always had things handed to him without ever lifting a finger, was now facing nothing, and for the first time, he had no way out. "This isn't over," he hissed, voice shaking with rage. "I swear to God I'll fight this." My father nodded, utterly unfazed. "Then you'll waste the little money you have left on lawyers who will tell you the same thing I just did. You have nothing." I could see the vein in my brother's neck bulging, his hands clenched into trembling fists. His wife looked no better. Her breathing was uneven, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palm. They had built their lives on stealing. Stealing from me, stealing from my father, stealing from my mother. And now they had nothing left to take. The satisfaction that rolled through me was something I couldn't put into words. My father slowly stood, his presence commanding the room in a way only he could. "There's one more thing," he said. My brother swallowed, clearly dreading whatever was coming next. My father pulled out another document and set it on the table. "These are copies of the financial transactions, the ones showing that you stole from me." My brother didn't move. He barely breathed. "If you fight this, I will take them to the authorities," my father said, his voice quiet but filled with absolute certainty, "and you will spend the rest of your life paying for what you've done." My brother's face drained of color. His wife gasped, turning to him with wide eyes. "Wait, what?" she whispered, grabbing his arm. "Tell me he's lying." He didn't answer, because he couldn't. My father crossed his arms. "So, here's your choice," he said. "You can leave here right now, accept that you've lost and never come back. Or," he leaned forward slightly, "you can fight me, and I will make sure you regret it." The threat hung in the air, thick and heavy. And then, for the first time, my brother broke. His shoulders sagged, the fire in his eyes dying out. He knew he had lost. His wife, however, wasn't ready to give up. "We'll take legal action." "Shut up!" my brother snapped at her, his voice hollow, defeated. She recoiled, her eyes widening. "Excuse me?" He didn't look at her. "Just shut up," my father exhaled, shaking his head. "That's what I thought." Without another word, my brother pushed back from the table and stood up. His movements were slow, heavy, as if he had aged 10 years in just a few minutes. His wife stared at him in disbelief, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "That's it? You're just going to take this?" He didn't answer. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You're a joke." I watched as something flickered in his expression. Hurt, shame. But he didn't argue, because deep down, he knew this was the end. Without another word, my father reached for his glass of water, took a slow sip, and then nodded toward the door. "You can leave now." My brother clenched his jaw, his entire body vibrating with anger. But he didn't argue. He didn't fight. Instead, he turned and walked away, his wife scrambling after him, heels clicking against the floor. I let out a slow breath, feeling something inside me unravel. For years, I had carried the weight of their betrayal. For years, I had told myself that justice didn't exist, that they would always win, always land on their feet. But now I was the one standing tall. And as they walked out that door, I knew I would never have to look back. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing through the house like a final nail in a coffin. My brother and his wife were gone for good. I sat there, staring at the empty space where they had been, feeling an odd, unfamiliar sensation settle over me. It wasn't just relief, it was freedom. For years, I had lived under the weight of what they had done to me. The betrayal, the humiliation, the injustice. It had consumed me, eaten away at me in ways I hadn't even realized until now. I had told myself that time had healed me, that I had moved on, but it wasn't time that healed wounds. It was justice, and justice had just been served. I exhaled slowly, turning to my father. He was still sitting, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest of his chair, his expression unreadable. The strength in his posture was still there, but there was something else too, fatigue. 3 months, that was all we had left. I felt my throat tighten. "Dad?" He looked at me, his eyes softer now. "You did well," he said simply. I let out a hollow laugh. "I didn't do anything." He shook his head. "You didn't lose yourself, not like he did." I frowned. "I almost did." He nodded, as if he had always known that. I glanced back at the door, my mind still replaying the look on my brother's face as he realized it was over. For so long he had been untouchable, the golden child, the one who always landed on his feet. But now his world was falling apart, and I wasn't going to stop it. The fallout began. The first cracks appeared within a week. It started with the money, or rather, the lack of it. Without my father's financial backing, my brother found himself struggling immediately. The house, the cars, the lavish lifestyle he and his wife had built weren't maintained by hard work. They were maintained by handouts. And now, the handouts were gone. I got the first call 3 days later. I let it ring, then another, ignored it. By the 4th day, he tried a different tactic, a message. "We need to talk." No explanation, no apology, just 4 meaningless words. I deleted it. Cracks in the perfect marriage appeared. A week later, my father and I were having lunch when the first real piece of news came in. My father's lawyer had called with an update. My brother's wife had tried to contest the will, tried and failed. The look on my father's face when he heard was one of complete and utter amusement. "She really thought that would work?" I smirked. She never could accept reality. And reality was crashing down on her. It wasn't just the money, it was the public perception. For years, my brother and his wife had built their image around wealth, success, and power. They had flaunted it online, bragged about it to their friends, acted like they were superior to everyone else. Now people were watching them crumble, and as the money dried up, so did their marriage. 2 weeks after the will was finalized, I got another message, this one from her. "He's ruining us. Do you really want to see your own brother like this?" I stared at the words, letting them sink in. Ruining us. not ruining himself, ruining them. Because, of course, in her mind, this was never about his mistakes, never about the choices they made. It was about who was left to blame. And for the first time, she was realizing that my brother had nothing left to offer. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The collapse continued. By the time a month had passed, my brother was completely unrecognizable. The company he worked for, one that our father had helped him get into, let him go after his financial troubles became public. Turns out executives don't take too kindly to fraud when it's splashed across legal documents. His wife? She left him. I don't know when or how, but one day she just vanished. She deleted her social media accounts, cut ties with mutual friends, disappeared into whatever hole she had crawled out of. And my brother? He was alone. The last message he sent me came exactly 5 weeks after the meeting at my father's house. "Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought about everything. About the betrayal, the years of pain, the anger, the nights I had spent wondering why I was the one who lost everything. And now, looking at his message, I realized something. I wasn't happy, because happiness had nothing to do with him anymore. I had my father. I had my peace. I had my freedom. So instead of replying, I did the one thing I should have done years ago. I deleted his number, and I moved on. The storm didn't just hit my brother's life. It devastated it. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as everything he had built on lies and stolen opportunities collapsed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel pity for him, because the truth was, he did this to himself. The financial freefall continued. My brother had always lived a life of excess, expensive vacations, designer suits, first-class flights. He was the type of man who never checked price tags because he never had to, until now. Without my father's support, he was drowning. The house, the mansion, was the first to go. The bank seized it faster than he could fight back. Turns out living on credit and empty promises only works when you have someone else's money to back it up. Then came the cars, the ones he had driven just to show off, the ones he had taken pictures with, captioning them with, "Success isn't given, it's earned." Now gone. Repossession notices, frozen accounts, a rapid descent from power to nothingness. And the best part? It was all public. The same social circles that once worshipped him were now whispering behind his back. The same people who had toasted champagne with him were now laughing at him, and he couldn't stand it. The divorce finalized, but his biggest loss? Her? His golden trophy, my ex-wife, the woman he stole from me, convinced that life would be better with her by his side. She had stuck around for as long as she could. Maybe she thought the money would magically reappear. Maybe she assumed my father would have a change of heart and fix everything. But when the reality of being broke sank in, so did she. One day she was there, demanding solutions, insisting that my brother do something, and the next she was gone. Left him just as easily as she had left me. No warning, no farewell, just disappearance. I learned through a mutual acquaintance that she had moved out and filed for divorce within weeks, took whatever small assets were still in her name and vanished into a new life. She had bet on the wrong man, and now she was looking for another one to save her. But my brother? He had nothing left to offer. Rock bottom came 3 months after my father cut him off. My brother reached his lowest point. I heard the rumors, how he was desperately trying to borrow money from anyone who would listen, how he had resorted to selling everything he still owned just to pay off debts, how no one wanted to help him. The mighty had fallen, and no one cared. And then, one evening, I got a call, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then another, then a text. "Please, just pick up." I stared at the screen for a long time. I knew exactly who it was, and I knew exactly what he wanted. Money, a second chance, a lifeline. And for a split second, I felt something. Not guilt, not sympathy, but a strange, distant sadness. Because once upon a time, before all of this, he had been my brother, and I had loved him. But that was a lifetime ago. So instead of responding, I did what I should have done years ago. I deleted the message, and I never looked back. The day of my father's funeral arrived with a gray, overcast sky, as if the world itself was mourning. The past few months had been a whirlwind, watching my brother's downfall, finalizing legal matters, and most importantly, spending every moment I could with my father. I had done my best to make his last days peaceful. We sat together in the evenings, reminiscing about old stories. He never spoke much about my brother after the will was finalized. He had made his decision and had no regrets. His focus was on me, on making sure I was prepared to carry on the family legacy. And then, just like that, he was gone. I stood by his grave, hands clenched at my sides as the priest spoke, his voice a dull hum in the background. The funeral was small. Family, a few old friends, business associates who had respected my father. But I knew there was one presence I had been dreading. And then I saw him, my brother. He stood a few yards away, not close enough to be part of the gathering, but not far enough to be unnoticed. He looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by something much more modest. His hair, always perfectly styled, was unkempt. He had lost weight, the arrogance stripped away from his posture, and for the first time in our lives, he looked truly alone. I turned back toward the casket, inhaling sharply as it was lowered into the ground. My father had always been my anchor, my quiet source of strength, and now I had to face the world without him. When the service ended, people began to trickle away, offering their condolences before departing. I kept my gaze forward, refusing to acknowledge my brother's presence, but I knew he was waiting for a chance to talk to me. And sure enough, as soon as the crowd had thinned, I heard his voice. "We need to talk." I closed my eyes briefly before turning to face him. "There's nothing left to say." He hesitated, shifting on his feet. I didn't think he would actually cut me off." His voice was raw, almost hoarse. I thought he was bluffing. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "That's the problem. You never thought anything through. You always assumed there would be someone there to clean up your mess." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand how hard things have been." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Hard?" I took a step toward him. "Hard is losing everything because of you. Hard is trying to rebuild my life from scratch while you lived in luxury. Hard is burying the only parent who still cared about me while you stood at a distance, too much of a coward to even say goodbye to him." He flinched, his shoulders sagging. I cut him off. "There's no apology that fixes this." He swallowed hard, looking down at the ground. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I stared at him for a long moment. I could see it now, the genuine regret, the loss. But it didn't matter anymore. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals can't be undone. I took a slow breath and looked him in the eyes. One last time. "Goodbye." And then I walked away. I didn't look back. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt free. The weeks following my father's funeral were quieter than I expected. No more tense conversations, no more unexpected phone calls, no more looming presence of my brother trying to claw his way back into my life. It was just me now, and for the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I spent most of my time at my father's house, the house that was now mine. It still felt strange, walking through the halls of my childhood, knowing that everything here belonged to me alone. I had spent so long being the forgotten son, the one left behind while my brother took center stage. Now it was his turn to disappear. I hadn't heard from him since the funeral. Part of me wondered if he had finally accepted that there was no way back, that the damage he had done was irreparable, or maybe he had just given up. Either way, it didn't matter anymore because I had no intention of looking for him. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, not just my father's estate, but my own peace of mind. The house held memories at first. It was difficult being in the house alone. Every room held memories, echoes of the past whispering through the walls. My mother's old reading chair by the fireplace, my father's study where I used to watch him work late into the night, even the dining room where so many family dinners had taken place before it all fell apart. But little by little, I started making it mine. I redecorated, replaced old furniture, cleared out the things that no longer held meaning, keeping only what truly mattered. It was my home now, and for the first time, I could breathe. Letting go of the past continued. One afternoon, as I sorted through my father's belongings, I came across a photo album I hadn't seen in years. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I was ready to face what lay inside, but as I flipped through the pages, I found myself smiling. There we were, my father, my mother, and me, long before the betrayals, before the bitterness, before my brother had stolen something that was never his to take. It reminded me that there had been good times, that my entire life hadn't been shaped by loss. And that realization, it was freeing. Because for the longest time, I had let anger define me, but I didn't have to anymore. A future of my own emerged. With the estate settled, I finally allowed myself to think about what came next. For so long, I had been caught up in the past. What my brother did, what my ex-wife took from me, what I lost. But now I was in control. I had the resources, the time, and most importantly, the clarity to move forward. And I wasn't going to waste it. I started making plans, expanding my business, traveling, doing all the things I had put on hold while drowning in betrayal. Because this was my life now, and I was ready to start living it. The sun was setting as I stood on the back porch of my father's house, my house now. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink, stretching endlessly across the horizon. The wind carried the scent of freshly cut grass, and for the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten: peace. The last few months had been a storm, a relentless hurricane of betrayal, loss, and reckoning. But now, as I stood here, staring at the vast land my father had built with his own two hands, I realized something. I had survived. And not just survived, I had won. Not in the way my brother would have defined it. To him, winning had always been about power, about taking from others to elevate himself. But my victory was different. I was free. I had no more unfinished battles, no more debts to pay, no more ghosts of the past whispering in my ear. I had walked through the fire, endured every loss, and come out the other side stronger, reclaiming myself. That night, I sat at the dining table, sipping a glass of whiskey, reflecting on everything that had led me here. I had spent years in the shadow of my brother's betrayal, feeling like a fool for trusting the people who had turned on me so easily. I had spent years questioning if I was too weak, too blind to see it coming. But now I realized it wasn't my failure, it was theirs. They had destroyed themselves. I had simply endured. A life of my own choosing was finally within reach. For the first time in forever, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's choices. I wasn't rebuilding my life because of what they had done. I was building it because I wanted to. I had the money, the freedom, and the clarity to go anywhere, do anything. The house was mine. The business was thriving. And there was no one left to hold me back. And it felt good. No more looking over my shoulder. No more waiting for the past to catch up with me. No more wondering if my brother would ever change. He wouldn't. And it no longer mattered. The final closure came unexpectedly. One morning, I received an email from him. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It was short. I lost everything. I don't know where to go from here. If you ever cared about me, even a little, you'll help me. Please. I sat there, rereading the words, waiting to feel something: anger, sadness, regret. But there was nothing, because I had finally let go. I didn't respond. I simply deleted it. And as I walked out into the bright morning sun, feeling its warmth on my skin, I smiled, because I was finally, truly free.